The incessant abduction of students and pupils by rampaging bandits in several northwest states threatens the education in northern Nigeria. Recently, This Day newspaper reported that no fewer than 618 schools have remained closed in 6 northern states over the fear of attack and abduction of pupils and members of staff. If not well managed, this phenomenon will unarguably lead to the total collapse of the education in the north. Well, joining us now to speak on the state of emergency for education in northern Nigeria is the CEO of Teach for Nigeria, Folawe Omikunle. Thank you so much for joining us on the morning show.
Thank you for having me. Good morning.
Good morning. Let me begin by asking you what your thoughts are on this development. For some, this is a direct and deliberate attack on education. For others, like the governor of Kaduna State, where we had the latest abduction, Governor Nasiru El-Rufai, he says the abductors or the bandits, attack schools because they grab the biggest headlines, the best headlines, and they cut away the best monies when they abduct students. So what exactly is really going on here? What are your thoughts?
I think it's a mix, it's a blend of both, right? We have a situation here where, of course, the bandits and the kidnappers have found this situation to be lucrative, and you have an issue of unemployment, you have an issue of poverty, and so definitely, if they find that people are able to pay ransom, if they find that it's also attended to, if it's getting the attention that it's needed for them to pay ransom, for them to be able to to create the buzz, to create the agency, they would definitely apply that route. So there is that, but there is also just a significant impact that this is having on education. There's just the fact that this group of people are not necessarily the Boko Haram. This group of people are literally people who have just found an opportunity to disrupt education, to also get the attention of government and get the attention of people, but also get funding from it. So literally, we're finding that they're living from the regular rampant kidnapping of people who are plying the roads to now going to schools, which is gaining more attention and which is also finding them more resources and funding. So I definitely think it's a mix. And, I've been talking about this situation, and I don't see the attention that we need to invest in addressing this situation given by government. I don't see our leadership committing to really treat. I think it's beyond a state of emergency. I think we've passed that years ago. We're now in a state that has gone beyond a state of emergency. And I worry, I'm really concerned, about just how to go from here, because I don't also think that it's one thing where there's a single solution to it. I think we would need to really think about some multi-stakeholders, some, multi-faceted ways of solving this situation that we're in, which is dire at the moment. But I think it's a mixed bag.
You've already talked about how there's no just one-size-fits-all solution when it comes to tackling insecurity, especially as it pertains to education. But I do want to ask you what side of the fence you're most comfortably on when it comes to the closure of these schools. Do you think that is the best situation for now, or do you think, as a teacher, with the position you hold, that the delaying of children's education should be the very last resort? What is your thought on that?
I've been reading some articles that are showing to us the impact of school closure during the pandemic and, the lockdown that happened and just that impact on kids. A lot of people transitioned and went on to hybrid measures. We used leverage technology to continue to engage students, but we're now finding out that, indeed there was a huge learning loss. Indeed, there was a huge gap, and we cannot totally replace, our education system with leveraging technology alone, but we need to figure out how to potentially, use a hybrid measure. So the truth of the matter is we cannot keep our schools closed. We cannot keep our schools shut. But then also, education cannot wait for us to figure out how to sort out school safety. Education cannot wait for us to figure out how to sort out, this terrorism issue. And, so when I think about this, we cannot close schools, but we also have to figure out how to ensure that we keep our schools safe. The government needs to live up to its responsibilities of ensuring that lives and properties are secure. You and I will agree that, we went to schools in a time whereby whether you went to a public school or you went to a private school, You had no business thinking about whether you're safe or not. Imagine the emotional impact, imagine the psychological impact on students, on parents, on community members, just sitting in the classroom and thinking, you could potentially be attacked, your school could potentially be bombed from any moment. Imagine the impact across the entire school system, from the head teachers to the school security to the student themselves. Just imagine how distracting that would be. And the challenge that we're facing now, and this issue we're facing now, we're seeing how this is impacting on the growing rate of out of school children in northern Nigeria. We're seeing how that is impacting on even just no school attendance at all, because parents are there saying, what is the point of sending their kids to school if they're going to go to school and get kidnapped? One of the parents of one of the girls who was kidnapped in Kaduna State recently passed out and died, this morning, and from a heart attack from his daughter. He fell ill after the news. How would that encourage the group of people that we're trying to encourage to send their kids to school? Because we know what attendance does, for the learning process. So back to your question, we really just have to figure out how to ensure that schools are kept safe. We need to figure out how to ensure that, this is, yes, the responsibility of the government, which they need to take ownership of, but how do we also engage community in ensuring safety of the school?
Indeed. I know Teach for Nigeria recruits individuals in different fields to teach in underserved schools and underserved communities. I was wondering, do you have any of such individuals in the northern part of Nigeria? What is the true state? How bad really is it? I know you've talked about attendance and the long-term impact, but paint a picture for us. How bad is this truly?
So I'm going to paint a picture of a state in northeast Nigeria. And, I was having I'm not going to call the name of the state, but I was having a conversation with the leadership of the Ministry of Education and the State Universal Basic Education Board. And I sat in that meeting, and by the time, the statistics and all these facts were laid out, it was such an overwhelming situation. And I'll share with you. So this is a state that has been, that has been experiencing, Boko Haram attacks for years. The last 2 years is the first time that they haven't had any direct attack on their schools. The schools are usually the first place of attack. And so they have schools that have been permanently shut, since 2012, since 2010, and those schools are not active. So you have a migration of students and families who have moved to the city or the capital. And so you have an overpopulation of schools at the center. You have overcrowded classrooms. I mean, they were sharing data around having about 18,000 students in a school that is usually, that has a capacity of say 3,000 plus students. And then you have teachers who are not even able to teach or navigate, and you don't even have enough teachers. In that same state, the Commissioner for Education shared that there's no family in that state that hasn't experienced, the loss of a family member, to an attack or to terrorism. You also have a situation whereby, because of the situation, quality teachers have left the state to other states. But what you now have are teachers who are underqualified, teachers who have individuals who have no business being in classrooms, who are now the ones taking up the job to teach the students. Now you have a situation whereby they've compared the grade level of a head teacher and even of teachers on ground to a grade 4, primary 4. Some of them are not even up to primary 1, in terms of whether literacy, or even for them to be able to carry out their responsibilities. So they have such a dire situation whereby to even attempt changing and restructuring everything happening there, first we need to figure out where the pipeline of where to find the teachers from who would stay there, and you also need to guarantee them security, because if not, the same thing will happen where the people can go elsewhere to find jobs, the qualified teachers can go elsewhere to find jobs, and then also the parents wouldn't be convinced or encouraged to send their kids to the school. Remember that when we have an issue of deficit in terms of needs, we also have an issue of deficit in terms of quality, and that is one of the things that a lot of these states are dealing with. So it's really, really bad, and I just don't know how else to explain this. And I always just wonder, like, we're able to share all of this facts and data and statistics, and some people are seeing for themselves, but what are we also doing about it? How are we building consensus around all the different agencies, all the different stakeholders? How are we coming together to say, what are we doing for education in northern Nigeria over 5-10 years? What could we possibly be doing? And these are not, because I think the constant approach is always like a one-off, single bullet type solution, but this is not one of it. Like, this has to be all encompassing. Where do we see parents playing a role here? Where do we see community members playing a role here? And I say that because, during the lockdown, we started to experience in some parts of Nigeria where there was insecurity, there was robbery attacks here and there and all of that. But we saw how the community rose. A particular case that I remember was a community somewhere in Ota in Ogun State, whereby the men in the community were coming at night and protecting and securing their streets, and homes. And I'm just wondering, like, yes, government needs to ensure that we have well-equipped, security personnel, and they need to be there within communities where schools are, but also what role can the community members play? What role can the religious leaders play? What role can elders play? And it has come to that now, because education cannot wait. Imagine in 2013, there were 10.5 million children out of school. That is about 8 years now that we've gone. What have we done to ensure that we're mopping or mapping, we're gathering data around those children? How do we ensure we provide them with skills? We upskill them, because if not, we're going to keep perpetuating this cycle of banditry, of kidnapping, because why? We have an active, youth population who are going to, again, just continue in that cycle of, being jobless, being, unskilled, not able to think and problem solve and create solutions and ideas and what have you. So we're going to be back here if we're not thinking about how to also ensure that, even the kids who are out of school, the kids who are dropping out now, we're figuring out how to ensure that they have skills, how to ensure that we're empowering them.
Understood. I want to ask you, off the back of what you've just said there, naturally these things, these attacks on schools, these closures are going to have an impact, a negative impact on children's education. So when you look towards the future, how does that make you feel about the quality of education these future generations are going to have? Do you feel hopeful for the future or hopeless about it?
So I'm constantly optimistic, about just what is possible. I'm optimistic because we have such a young, population in Nigeria that can channel their energies, towards ensuring that the country is able to develop, according to our desires. But when I look at the state of education, I'm not as hopeful. I'm not hopeful because there's several things that we could be doing differently. Like, I think about an education system, and I think about, the words, I think this was McKinsey that said, no education system can rise above the quality of its teachers. I think about that, and I think about, how we continue to recruit, the sort of teachers we continue to recruit, because the truth of the matter is there's no amount, and we saw that even during the school lockdown, during the pandemic, there's no amount of technology that can take the place of a teacher. If you don't have a teacher who is able to, who is able to be creative, who is able to leverage technology, who is digitally literate, there's no magic that person can perform, with that tool. So when I think about just how dire the situation is, we need to overhaul, the teaching force. We need to train our teachers differently. We need to train them. We need to, reform and restructure the colleges of education. We need to change how we're also attracting.
One thing this space of abduction has probably revealed to some of us, and perhaps maybe a lot of us, is even the state and the condition of these schools that we're talking about. I remember the school in Kankara, even the one in Kagara, Katsina, and Kaduna State. They were in deplorable states. And when you see those structures, how serious really are we about educating these young ones?
I mean, you've just said that there. Like, you see the state of the school building, even the kids are not encouraged and motivated. That's definitely something that the environment does, for wanting to learn and for wanting to go to school. And, I've seen that personally in the work that we do, whereby, the teachers, the fellows that we place, who are the teachers, who we place to go into certain schools, get into the classroom and see the school in a state whereby their kids obviously, don't feel proud, of their classroom. And then they change the whole look, of the classroom by painting, by, by fixing the furniture and building furniture, by plastering the floor and things like that. And we see how that actually gets kids excited and gets them to come to school and they want to learn, because of just that environment. So we see that. And, also you think about just what we continue to contribute towards our national, towards education within our national budget. And you can tell how serious, how we've prioritized our education. Because if we're only committing 6 to 7% of our national budget, to education, then you can tell, how serious that makes us, And so it's just so unfortunate that this is what the situation is, but this is where we need to call for, and I think, we really need to call for action. We need to demand for more from our government, from our leaders, from our local government, from our state government, from the agencies and ministries in charge of education, in charge of ensuring that, the schools are built and the schools are put in a way that, kids are able to come to school. It's such a hopeless situation, and this cuts across the entire country. So it's not whether this is only happening in the north or whether it's everywhere you go where you see this situation, and it's so unfortunate. I remember I was speaking one time to the former Minister for Education of Zimbabwe, Zingai Mutumbuka, and he said to me that during his time while he was Minister for Education, the reason why education in Zimbabwe at that point worked was because everyone across board, across government, knew their responsibility. The Ministry of Works knew why it was important to build schools in a certain way. The Ministry of Finance knew why it was important to allocate funding, to education. The parents knew why it was important to ensure their children were well fed and brought to school early every day in the morning. Police and military knew why it was important to ensure that the society was safe and the communities were safe so that kids could attend. And so we need to see how every area and every aspect contributes to ensuring that the teaching and learning process can take place successfully. And we haven't gotten there yet, because I don't see those sort of conversations. I don't see that ownership of what is my own role in ensuring that children across Nigeria are able to learn. What can private sector do? What can social entrepreneurs do? And I don't see that happening. So we definitely need to understand that we have a situation at hand that that calls for everyone's attention and for everyone to play a part, and to take responsibility of this problem. Otherwise, if we continue on this path, I really don't know what our next 10 years will be like, especially because we also have the learning loss of even the children who are in school, the students who are in the school. We still don't know, because of course this is also a country where we do badly with data. So we still don't know how dire the situation of even having the schools locked down for almost a year, has had on students learning. We also don't really have a systemic approach as to how to ensure that all that learning loss that has happened, how do we ensure that these kids continue to learn? What are we doing with our school calendar? What are we doing? All of that. You cannot really see any strategic, I would say plan as to how we want to do this across the nation. On top of that, we're now having to shut down some schools because of insecurities. So when I think about the next 10 years, I worry. I worry because, we might be going beyond what is happening now in Northeast Nigeria, where literally this starts to spill across the entire nation. And maybe then we will wake up and realize that, it's not just about Northern Nigeria, but it's only a matter of time before this really overwhelms the entire country.
Understood and agreed. If we talk about perhaps the quality, I know you talked in your answer there about the quality of education as it pertains to students, but I imagine this is also a difficult time for teachers themselves too, whether or not they're able to continue training and making sure that they're able to deliver education at their optimum. There does seem to be a conversation about the quality among teachers themselves, and this situation in Northern Nigeria only exacerbates that. What are your thoughts on teacher training independent of them being in classrooms, and and how much support they have already or should have in order to make sure that they continue to deliver education at the highest levels?
I think at different points in time, like my eyes have been open to just different layers of reality that we face within our education system. During the pandemic, we launched a program at Teach for Nigeria that was looking to train 12,000 plus teachers across Nigeria, which we were able to do across 29 states. But I can tell you for free that less than 50% of the, so we had to, because of course we couldn't gather in person, we had to deploy this training via WhatsApp. And I would tell you that it was almost impossible. Like I thought for a second, looking at the group chats that were on WhatsApp, you would think that you were engaging with, people who had never been to school. Now these are teachers. The construction of sentences, like you couldn't even make sense. Like you would read some sentences and you wouldn't even be able to make sense or comprehend what exactly it is that they're trying to say. So it was so difficult. I feel like another group of teachers started to sort of do some sort of like literacy training on those platforms because it was just so difficult to pass the message across. We had to do so. We eventually did because the materials, all of that was shared through WhatsApp. The presentations, etc., was shared through WhatsApp. But in terms of like the number of teachers who were able to benefit from it, it definitely was less than 50%, and this was 12,000 plus. And when I think about the focus group that we recently just had with some of the teachers who participated, they said to us, it's just no way that it will work. Some of them complained about lack of data. Some of them said, I don't even have a smartphone that allow for me to, learn via WhatsApp. Some of them said, I haven't had electricity in my community for over 2 years. So there were different issues like that. How much are teachers paid, to allow them to invest their money in buying data for one training? How do we fix that? There's certain communities as well where you can't even get any network service. It's so difficult, to tap into even data. So there were all that issues. And what they were clamoring for was to do in-person trainings. Now, what I saw differently on another side with like teachers who were working in some private schools, they were, even before training came to them, they were going online, finding resources on how to improve their own skills and how to better teach virtually and remotely, and all of that was happening. But we could see the gap even within teacher quality where, some teachers are just there waiting for the schools to reopen so that they can go back to business as usual, while other teachers who were in much more, in better performing schools or in private schools were going out there looking, because they have imbibed the spirit of lifelong learning, taking ownership of their own learning and training and professional development. And we could see that gap as well. So the truth is that we really need to fix the quality of teachers that we're getting into our teaching force. We can no longer continue to have JAM, which is over 400, recruiting and attracting the ones who are scoring 100 and 120 over 400 into our education system and expect the best and expect them to then do some by way of magic, perform magic and then produce the quality of citizens that we want for our country.
Well said. Although you paint a very disturbing, heartbreaking picture of the education system in Nigeria, but I guess we'll keep our fingers crossed and hope for the best. Thank you so much, Folawe, for being on the show this morning.
Thank you for having me.